4 years have been erased from your life, but you don't remember a single moment from that entire period. You don't know where you were, what happened, or why you were released while the other person never returned. This is not just a story about a disappearance. This is a story about a return that raises far more questions than the disappearance itself. Two people entered Carlsbad Caverns. 4 years later, one was found hiding in an abandoned structure in the New Mexico desert, a hollowed-out human being, a man without memories, without a past. What happened to him, and what became of his remaining companion, remains a mystery that chills the blood. The most terrifying thing in this story is the silence. The silence of the underworld and the silence of the sole survivor. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. On the morning of April 12, 2007, in the limestone desert area near Carlsbad, New Mexico, the weather was dry and still. At 6:58 a.m., the surveillance camera at the Devil's Ridge access side entrance of Carlsbad Caverns recorded a silver SUV pulling up on the rocky lot before the start of the cave entry route. Two young explorers, Jonas Reed and Lucas Hale, stepped out of the vehicle and headed toward the narrow entrance leading down into the multi-level cave system below ground. According to park rangers' reports, they were wearing lightweight caving gear, carrying headlamps, climbing ropes, handheld positioning devices, and enough water for a day-long survey. Their goal was to reach a lesser-visited side branch to document geological changes and take additional field note photographs. Carlsbad Caverns is renowned for the thick, heavy stillness of the underground air mixed with the long-standing scent of limestone and moisture rising from natural deep pits. The main passages branch into dozens of side routes, forming a dark labyrinth that allows only a few faint rays of light from the surface before being swallowed by blackness. The exploration log that morning recorded a brief entry from Jonas Reed. At 7:05 a.m., the two were proceeding along the Devil's Ridge route and would return before dusk. This became the last confirmed trace of their presence in the controlled area. By evening, when family members tried to make contact but received no signal from Jonas, concern began to grow. Loss of signal around Carlsbad Caverns is common, where deep rock cavities swallow all electronic communications, but Jonas and Lucas's disciplined nature made their families realize this silence was not normal. At 9 p.m. on April 12, they officially called park rangers, reporting that the two explorers were overdue and had left no signs of communication. Upon receiving the information on the morning of April 13, 2007, the National Park Service immediately activated standard SR search and rescue procedures for a cave environment incident, mobilizing the Carlsbad Caverns Technical Rescue Team along with park rangers and certified volunteer teams. By 6:20 a.m., the Devil's Ridge access area was temporarily cordoned off. A field command post was established, and the initial sweep began at the entrance to determine whether Jonas Reed and Lucas Hale had exited during the night without reporting. Preliminary checks found no fresh footprints, no unusual slips or rock falls around the cave mouth. The exit marker light remained untouched, indicating no one had disturbed it since the camera captured them at 6:58 a.m. the previous day. Phase 1 SR teams were divided into two groups, each assigned to the safest routes descending to the middle level of the cave system, focusing on branches near areas commonly visited by tourists or researchers without requiring complex rope techniques. Standard procedure required each team to perform 3 types of checks: observing reflected light from headlamps to detect moving glints, listening for echoes in the passages to identify unusual sounds or faint calls, and searching for physical signs such as mud on boots, hand scrapes, or fresh rockfall. By 8 a.m., the first group reached the West Drift Branch, where high humidity and soft ground could preserve tracks for 12-18 hours. However, the ground only showed old boot marks from last week's survey groups, none matching the sole patterns registered for Jonas or Lucas's gear. Amplified calls echoed into the depths with no response, only returning the type of quick dissipating echo that indicated no nearby obstacles or human bodies. The second group proceeded to Lower Rim, an area prone to minor rockfall, but despite checking every rock pile, they found no dropped equipment fragments or fresh scrapes on the limestone surface. The SR team also noted no artificial light sources, which would be easily detectable in the thick darkness inside Carlsbad Caverns. After nearly 4 hours of close-range sweeping, the report to command stated that all feasible branches the two explorers could have used for a short trip showed no signs of life or recent activity. SAR protocol requires expanding the search radius concentrically when Phase 1 yields nothing, based on the possibility that the two may have taken a wrong turn into an unsurveyed side branch or fallen into a deep unmarked pit due to loose rock. Command immediately updated the search map, adding higher difficulty routes like Black Needle Corridor and Stone Vale Shaft to the next inspection list. Meanwhile, the communications team rechecked camera footage and motion sensors at the side entrance to confirm nothing was missed overnight. All data came back negative. By noon, the atmosphere at the field command post grew heavier as all efforts to sweep near-surface areas produced no signs that Jonas Reed and Lucas Hale remained within a safe range. This forced SAR Command to accept the possibility that the two had deviated from their planned route, meaning they could be in low oxygen zones, lost in maze-like side passages, or trapped in unmarked sinkholes. Nevertheless, rescue operations continued at the strictest level. Every checkpoint was logged in sequence. Teams maintained constant radio contact, and specialized equipment was brought in to prepare for the next, more technical phase of the search. When transitioning to Phase 2 of the operation, SAR forces began advancing deeper into areas where, based on the Carlsbad Caverns technical rescue team's experience, even a small navigational error could cause explorers to become disoriented or trapped in narrow rock fissures. From the field command post, the three-dimensional cave system map was expanded with additional layers, marking routes with medium to high hazard levels, such as Black Needle Corridor, Stone Vale Shaft, and Mosaic Descent, areas requiring rope skills, navigation in total darkness, and handling complex obstacles. At 1 p.m. on April 13, 2007, Technical Team 2 was ordered to approach the Black Needle Branch, a twisting rock corridor with loose gravel flooring, capable of registering movement if someone had passed through within the last 24 hours. At the third turn of the corridor, they noted an unusual disturbed rock area, small limestone fragments scattered in a direction toward a deep alcove in the middle of the passage, suggesting an object or person had slid across. However, the cave's humidity caused the rock surface to dry quickly, making it difficult to determine the exact timing of the disturbance. A rock sample was collected for mineral dust adhesion analysis, but no firm conclusions could be drawn yet. At a lower level, Technical Team 3 approached Stone Vale Shaft, a natural vertical shaft nearly 30 meters deep, typically only surveyed by teams with fixed rope gear. At the shaft's edge, they discovered a small section of rope, about 25 centimeters long, frayed at both ends, wedged under a rock slab. The rope segment did not match the standard climbing rope type registered to Jonas Reed and Lucas Hale, but its industrial nylon material prevented the search team from ruling out the possibility that it was an auxiliary item they might have carried. To avoid speculation, the evidence was tagged, sealed, and plotted on the field map using the Caverns Technical Rescue Team's internal coordinate grid system. Near the end of the day, the fourth team reported finding a cluster of chalky rock dust scratched on a wall surface in Mosaic Descent, at shoulder height. The scratches were scattered, not forming clear symbols, but also not matching typical natural wear patterns. A surface sample was scanned with blue light for fabric fibers or body oils, but on-site results showed no clear biological traces. These scattered small finds, when brought back to command, created a dense but unconnected list of items: rope segment, disturbed rock area, wall scratch cluster, all potentially related, yet equally possibly remnants of prior surveys. SAR protocol requires evaluating relevance based on probability rather than drawing conclusions without direct evidence. Thus, each item was assigned the status not excluded, undetermined, and logged into the joint search file for the two explorers. Rescue forces continued expanding the search in a spiral pattern, pushing 400, 600 meters deeper into rarely visited branches, including two areas marked as exceeding safe limits for regular visitors: Razorline Rift and Chasm B7. To ensure safety, every team entering or exiting reported fixed-time checkpoints via radio and marked traverse sections with reflective tape to minimize risks of redundant routes or oversights. Over the following 48 hours, SARE teams swept more than 19 side branches in total, remeasuring floor humidity, sound attenuation, and minor air temperature shifts, indicators that sometimes suggest human presence. But all readings remained steady and indifferent, characteristic of a cave without new movement. No strange sounds, no returning light reflections, no footprints in the fine sediment layer. CO-THET sensors, expected to detect breathing if victims were nearby, also registered no significant changes. By the end of the third day since the disappearance, the field command post received the consolidated report. No evidence carried enough weight to determine Jonas Reed and Lucas Hale's travel route, and no discoveries indicated they remained in the mid and lower level areas accessible by standard procedures. The minor clues gathered stayed at the possible threshold, but failed to form any coherent investigative hypothesis. Nevertheless, the SARE campaign adhered to regulations and remained open, preparing to enter the final expansion phase if no new results emerged in the near term. After 3 days of fruitless searching, and with all collected evidence remaining at the level of not excluded but insufficiently connected, the SARE command post began shifting to the technical analysis phase to reconstruct a plausible travel route for Jonas Reed and Lucas Hale inside Carlsbad Caverns on April 12, 2007. Geological and aerodynamic data for the cave in 2007 were extracted from NPS archives, including natural airflow diagrams, seasonal temperature humidity measurements, limestone bedrock seismic maps, and microsubsidence frequency in each area. One of the distinctive features of Carlsbad Caverns is the cave-breathing airflow system, where external temperature and pressure directly influence internal wind currents, creating push-pull flows that can inadvertently lead explorers off course into side branches. Based on meteorological data for April 12, the analysis team noted a slight drop in air pressure between approximately 9:11 a.m., corresponding to the time frame when Jonas and Lucas were believed to have moved deeper into the middle level of the cave system. This pressure drop typically generates downward suction from upper to lower levels, particularly strong in funnel-shaped structures such as Razorline Rift and Chasm B7. Consequently, the first simulation map identified these two branches as points with high likelihood of drawing explorers off route due to powerful airflow creating the sensation of expanding space ahead or leading to a larger chamber. The engineering team also analyzed thermal stability in deep alcoves to determine the possibility that the two had sought rest spots or been detained by excessively slick wet rock floors. Results showed unusually high humidity in mosaic descent over the preceding 3 months, likely creating slippery surfaces upon reaching the second incline, making this branch the third candidate on the high-risk route list. All data were compiled into an evaluation matrix in which probabilities of navigational error, terrain complexity, individual rockfall-prone slabs, and layered geological features prone to imbalance were scored. Razorline Rift, Chasm B7, and Mosaic Descent stood out with the highest risk scores, and Command decided to deploy 3 specialized deep exploration teams to approach each branch in priority order based on feasibility that Jonas and Lucas could have entered them. To maximize accuracy, each team carried 3-level gas sensors, ground-penetrating scanners, handheld ground-penetrating radar, and infrared cameras. The objective of this phase was not direct rescue, but route reconstruction and identification of any breakpoints in their journey if present. At 7:10 a.m. on April 16, Priority Team 1 entered Razorline Rift, a razor blade-like rock structure with narrow fissures alternating with vertical ledges. This formation caused strong converging airflow, easily creating spatial illusion. The team swept every ledge, using pressure sensors to detect signs of recent human movement, but all readings fell within baseline thresholds. No changes suggested recent activity. Layered rock slabs remained intact, fine rock dust evenly coated, showing no form of disturbance. Priority Team 2 approached Chasm B7 via fixed-rope descent, dropping into a steep vertical shaft, opening into a stable chamber below. This area received special attention because airflow analysis indicated strong suction potential at the time the explorers lost contact. However, after using ground-penetrating radar to scan around the shaft edges and chamber floor, the technical team concluded no new voids had formed, no recent rockfall, and the sediment layer on the chamber floor showed no footprints. Several small cracks on the shaft walls were checked with seismic impulse equipment, but results showed no strong impact forces within the prior 72 hours. At Mosaic Descent, Priority Team 3 had to rig support lines to cross the previously warned slippery wet rock zone from prior survey reports. At the second incline ledge, where disturbed rock traces had once been noted, the team measured surface grip to assess slip risk. Testing showed the rock remained within safe limits unless subjected to sudden overhead force. This made Mosaic Descent a plausible accident site, but with no recovered equipment fragments or fresh impact marks, there was no basis to link it to the disappearance. Throughout 2 days of surveying, the teams consistently reported the same core finding to command. Everything remained pristine. No new rockfall, no fabric or rubber traces, no evidence whatsoever indicating two humans had been present in these deep branches recently. Temperature readings showed absolute stability. No anomalous hot or cold spots that human body presence typically creates in enclosed spaces. If Jonas and Lucas had passed through here, their traces had been erased with eerie perfection. This forced the technical analysis team to question whether they had truly chosen one of these three branches or been forced into an entirely unanticipated route. Although no firm conclusion could be reached, SAR Command had to acknowledge that all highest probability travel directions had been checked without results. Deep access protocols had been followed correctly. Technical methods fully applied, yet the vast, multi-layered cave system of Carlsbad Caverns continued its absolute silence in the face of human pursuit. When priority search routes yielded no results, and technical analyses failed to pinpoint Jonas Reed and Lucas Hale's travel direction, the NPS investigative team and Eddy County Sheriff's Office temporarily shifted focus to background vetting to rule out voluntary departure or intentional disappearance from the Carlsbad Caverns area. Pre-disappearance behavioral investigation ran in parallel, beginning with collection of full life data, employment records, financial status, and social relationships of the two explorers. Jonas Reed, 27, was a geological analysis technician for a mineral survey company in Albuquerque. Records showed stable income, no credit debt, regular payments, and no anomalies in the 6 months prior to disappearance. Lucas Hale, 26, was an independent documentary filmmaker specializing in natural environments and had collaborated with multiple conservation organizations. His bank account reflected only work-related expenditures, no large transfers, no unusual transactions, or signs of preparing to leave his residence. The team also gathered emails, work schedules, professional correspondence, and online information to verify any secret plans or intent to leave the state, but no clues suggested they planned to vanish or depart long-term. Interviews with family and close contacts revealed no signs of psychological stress, internal conflict, or unusual behavior before April 12. Jonas was described as meticulous, always adhering to schedules, and had never gone off-grid during prior surveys. Lucas was seen as outgoing, showing no depression symptoms, and had clear filming commitments in the following weeks, indicating no reason to abandon his work or current life. The investigation expanded interviews to caving groups and visitors registered for activities on the same day of disappearance. 3 independent exploration groups active from the morning of April 12 were interviewed. All confirmed no encounters with Jonas or Lucas at any intersections. Likewise, no one observed arguments, panic, or situations suggesting intentional departure from the area. In the University of New Mexico Geology Group's report, one member noted seeing the silver SUV in the rocky lot when leaving at 6 p.m., but saw no signs of anyone waiting or preparing to exit the park. This reinforced that the explorers had not returned to their vehicle after entering the cave. Interviews with acquaintances, colleagues, and friends likewise showed no social conflicts or financial disputes that could motivate voluntary disappearance. Neither was involved in high-risk organizations or groups, had no legal risk history, and there was absolutely no evidence they wished to sever social ties or evade anything. NPS also checked immigration records, traffic cameras, and post-disappearance credit card transactions to confirm no activity outside Carlsbad Caverns boundaries, all negative. Eddy County Sheriff's behavioral investigators concluded no elements matched patterns of voluntary disappearance, a finding strengthened by the fact that Jonas and Lucas carried high-value survey equipment, items no one intending to flee would abandon. The consolidated report to command affirmed that the possibility of the 2 victims actively leaving the cave system or deliberately vanishing lacked foundation. The absence of surface return traces, no signs of prior preparation, and no personal motives allowed investigators to completely rule out voluntary departure. This forced the investigation back to the cave system and more coercive or complex accident scenarios, while definitively closing any assumptions related to autonomous behavior by the 2 explorers prior to disappearance. After completely ruling out voluntary disappearance by Jonas Reed and Lucas Hale, NPS search and rescue forces, along with the Eddy County Sheriff's Office, entered the final phase of the months-long SAR campaign, regarded as the most comprehensive ever deployed at Carlsbad Caverns prior to 2007. Over 7 months, from April through late November, more than 140 rescue specialists, 32 geologists, 18 cave aerodynamics experts, and 11 rope teams were mobilized, covering over 60% of the humanly accessible cave structure without endangering search personnel. The final summary report documented more than 1,900 hours of underground work, 430 hours of drone exploration of large chambers, 220 hours of ground-penetrating radar scanning, and nearly 800 marked, noted, and repeatedly checked locations. Nevertheless, despite this unprecedented scale, the entire campaign produced no verifiable trace leading to the missing explorers. One of the greatest challenges of the expanded operation was the existence of areas rated inaccessible due to physical structure. Locations such as Narrow Crown Fault, with fissures under 30 centimeters wide, or the Spiral Sink System, more than 250 meters deep, with slopes exceeding safe rope limits, were simply too dangerous for human entry. Certain large chambers like Hollow Basin were documented to experience seasonal microsubsidence, creating continuously shifting rock slabs that risked triggering chain reactions upon direct contact with any equipment. Technical analysis confirmed that of more than 300 side branches in Carlsbad Caverns, at least 40 were unsurveyable by traditional methods in 2007, rendering full exploration impossible. Seasonal geological fluctuations also nearly erased any potential traces. From May through September, deep rock layer vapor combined with surface atmospheric pressure changes created continuous condensation evaporation cycles. These shifts caused fine rock dust on floors to migrate slightly, covering any slides, impressions, or disturbances possibly created while the explorers were present. Many ledges dry in April became damp and soft by June, completely obliterating surface compression signs. Alcoves capable of trapping fabric fibers or small material fragments were affected by periodic wind cycles that could pull lightweight objects deep into inaccessible fissures, permanently losing potential evidence. By late fall, cave conditions stabilized, but any human traces that might have existed had been wiped clean by 6 months of microfluctuations underground. In November, The final comprehensive review meeting was held at Carlsbad Caverns. All data were consolidated: plausible route maps, radar scan results, initial evidence logs, reports from over 60 deep survey sessions, aerodynamics data, background analysis, and victim lifestyle records. The meeting's goal was to determine if any new investigative direction could emerge from the synthesis. But the assessment quickly reached a grim conclusion. No piece within the enormous data volume formed a logical connecting path to the explorer's location. The recovered rope segment did not match their gear, disturbed rock areas lacked temporal certainty, and all airflow humidity terrain analyses offered no new leads beyond thoroughly checked branches. Some experts hypothesized entrapment in a rock void sealed by immediate post-fall microsubsidence, but no seismic readings supported this at the time of disappearance. More theoretical hypotheses, such as being swept to deeper levels by anomalous air currents, remained unverifiable due to lack of empirical data. Ultimately, in the report dated November 28, 2007, SAR Command signed the official conclusion: active search operations terminated. The case file was transferred to the NPS Long-Term Investigation Unit and Eddy County Sheriff's Office under Cold Case #07CC194. Case status changed to active investigation suspended, awaiting new data, meaning the case was not closed, but all direct search activities would cease unless new evidence, new witnesses, or unexpected geological discoveries arose in scientific surveys. After 7 months of maximum resource mobilization, Carlsbad Caverns retained its silence, and the disappearance of Jonas Reed and Lucas Hale was classified among the most mysterious vanishings ever recorded in this cave system. 4 years after case #07CC194 was transferred to cold case status, the disappearance at Carlsbad Caverns took an unexpected turn no one anticipated in early February 2011, when the management of an abandoned water pumping station in the old salt mine area near Loving, New Mexico, reported signs of unauthorized entry. During the inspection, security personnel discovered a man hiding in the underground technical room of the station, an unused space that still contained piping systems and sealed concrete alcoves. The individual was in severe exhaustion, visibly emaciated, wearing tattered old clothes covered in mineral dust, with darkened skin from prolonged lack of natural light and signs of severe spatial disorientation. When Eddy County authorities arrived at the scene, the man responded very slowly to simple commands, could not provide full personal information, and could only utter a few disjointed sentences in a hoarse voice, repeatedly mentioning a single name: Jonas. After being transported to Carlsbad Medical Center for stabilization of vital signs, temporary fingerprints were scanned using portable police equipment, and the results matched 98% with Jonas Reed's data from the 2007 missing persons file. During the initial verification phase, although detailed interviewing was not yet possible, doctors noted numerous signs indicating the man had lived under severely restricted conditions for an extended period: significantly reduced bone density, repetitive friction scars on wrists and ankles, suggesting possible binding or immobilization in a confined space, prolonged malnutrition, evident in localized muscle atrophy, and mild respiratory inflammation, indicating a poorly ventilated living environment. At the same time, investigators noted a striking detail: Jonas had no personal belongings, survival gear, or signs of long-distance travel on his person. This ruled out the possibility that he had escaped the cave on his own or lived as a vagrant. The medical report also pointed out numerous unevenly healed scars, indicating near total absence of medical care over many years. When Jonas temporarily recovered and could answer basic questions, investigators recorded that he suffered from short-term cognitive impairment and could only express himself in disjointed keywords, but everything he said, though incomplete, was consistent with never having left Carlsbad Caverns of his own volition. Jonas's reappearance after 4 years, in a physical condition clearly impacted by captivity or controlled confinement, immediately required reclassification of the entire disappearance case. Originally regarded as a natural event or caving accident, leading to permanent entrapment in the cave system. The case was now viewed from an entirely different perspective, the possibility of criminal activity. A temporary interagency command post was re-established on February 11, 2011, to prepare for reinvestigation procedures, including examination of the area where Jonas was found, assessment of potential third-party involvement, and reconnection of all data from the 2007 SR campaign. From the moment Jonas Reed was officially identified, the case was no longer classified as a simple disappearance. Instead, it was reclassified as suspected unlawful imprisonment and endangerment of life, opening an entirely new direction that investigators had never previously considered, as all 2007 data had shown no indication of human intervention. Jonas's return shattered the silence Carlsbad Caverns had maintained for 4 years, and forced authorities to recognize that geological accident hypotheses were no longer sufficient to explain what had happened to him since vanishing inside the cave in 2007. Immediately after Jonas Reed's vital signs were stabilized, the official identity confirmation process was initiated under the coordination of the NPS Forensics Division, Carlsbad Medical Center's laboratory, and the Eddy County Sheriff's Criminal Identification Unit. DNA samples from Jonas's oral mucosa were compared to DNA samples from his mother and brother in the database collected in 2007, yielding an exact match and eliminating any doubt about mistaken identity. In parallel with genetic testing, Jonas's dental records previously submitted to his health insurance company while working in Albuquerque were cross-referenced. The slightly misaligned incisors and silver filling on the lower left third molar matched perfectly with the man found. Distinctive moles on the right shoulder blade, and a 2.8 centimeter scar from a climbing accident in 2004 were confirmed by forensic physicians as additional identifying features, thereby solidifying the conclusion that the survivor was indeed Jonas Reed, missing for 4 years in Carlsbad Caverns. Once identity was confirmed, the medical team conducted an in-depth evaluation to determine the living conditions Jonas had endured during his disappearance. Initial observations of his body clearly suggested one reality: Jonas had not merely been trapped or lost, he had been held captive. His wrists and ankles bore multiple overlapping arc-shaped scars, evenly distributed, indicating prolonged presence of restraints or securing devices. The degree of callous tissue in these areas corresponded to deliberate repeated friction, not incidental scrapes. Old, discolored bruises on his right shoulder and side were distributed horizontally, consistent with prolonged side-lying posture, suggesting Jonas may have been restricted in sleeping or living positions within a very confined space. His skin showed patchy depigmentation, especially on the back and inner arms, indicating years of near-total lack of natural light exposure. A dermatologist assessed this condition as occurring only in patients living in environments with virtually no natural light contact for a minimum of 24-36 months. Jonas's hair was brittle and unevenly grown, indicating severely disrupted nutritional cycles. Blood analysis revealed chronic malnutrition, near zero vitamin D levels, low ferritin, albin below acceptable thresholds, all consistent with a body under tightly controlled rations for an extremely long time. DEXA bone scan showed Jonas's bone density equivalent to that of a 65-year-old, with an 18-22% reduction from age-matched norms. The orthopedic surgeon confirmed this could not occur in normal living conditions and only appeared when a patient was deprived of movement, confined in space, or forced to maintain fixed postures for extended periods. 2 healed hairline fractures appeared on the inner surface of the forearm bones in non-weight-bearing positions, indicating controlled external force trauma. These fractures were estimated to have formed 2-3 years prior to Jonas's discovery. Respiratory examination revealed mild but persistent inflammation consistent with a high humidity, poorly ventilated environment, characteristic of sealed underground spaces or artificially isolated areas. Analysis of residue under fingernails and on skin showed fine limestone mineral powder, very similar to that found in deep side branches of Carlsbad Caverns, particularly in rarely surveyed areas. However, the abnormally high concentration of mineral particles suggested Jonas had not merely passed through, but likely lived in a location with continuous limestone abrasion, such as a small chamber or natural confinement alcove. Neurological evaluation indicated Jonas exhibited language disorder from prolonged lack of communicative stimulation. He struggled to form sentences, had slow response reflexes, and could only verbalize fragmented memories. Notably, Jonas showed no brain injury from trauma. This indicated the communication issues stemmed not from impact or accident, but from extended absolute isolation. The comprehensive medical report, 86 pages long, presented a unified conclusion. Jonas Reed had been systematically confined for many years in an environment lacking light, movement, nutrition, and likely involving physical immobilization for extended periods. These injuries and physiological changes could not be explained by any form of natural cave accident. In summary, the 86-page medical report was forwarded directly to the Interagency Investigative Team for Criminological Analysis, marking the official shift of the case from a mysterious disappearance to unlawful imprisonment with a complex, prolonged mechanism carried out in complete isolation from the outside world. Once Jonas Reed was sufficiently stable for controlled questioning, the interagency team, including behavioral analysts, cave specialists, and NPS investigators, began collecting testimony using the fragmented memory extraction method employed in cases of long-term isolated victims with time disorientation and psychological trauma. Jonas could not describe events in a continuous narrative. Instead, he recalled only disjointed fragments of sounds, lights, physical sensations, and brief moments of awareness. Interviews were conducted in 20 30-minute segments, separated by mandatory rest periods to avoid neurological overload. Each session added small details, all recorded, transcribed, coded, and entered into the interagency analysis system. Initially, investigators organized 4 main data groups based on the memory fragments Jonas repeated with relatively high consistency. The first group was auditory data. In nearly every interview session, Jonas described hearing regular, light metallic clinking, not large machinery or engine noise, but steady clack-clack, sounds resembling metal objects rolling in a pipe or thin chains being gently pulled. He also described distant footsteps echoing through multiple layers of space, sometimes very clear, other times like mere air vibrations. Notably, Jonas recalled periods when footsteps were always accompanied by the sound of something heavy being dragged, repeating in regular cycles during the first many months of confinement. The second group was airflow data, considered one of the most valuable memory fragments due to the highly specific nature of cave airflow. Jonas described days with strong wind blowing from behind him, cold and dry, and days with almost stagnant air. He clearly remembered times of sharply increased humidity, making his skin stick to the rock, and times when the air was so stale he could smell intense mineral odor in his breath. This suggested his confinement location connected to multiple chambers with varying pressure, or a deep corridor with constrictions and expansions. Jonas also recalled periods of warmer than normal airflow, as if from a deeper space or near a large void. The third group was light data, though very limited but extremely important. Jonas mentioned red light, not the white light of ordinary flashlights. This light was weak and narrow, appearing for a few seconds before vanishing completely. He described it as resembling reflection from a metal surface or low-power lighting device, leading experts to rule out natural light filtering through cracks. Jonas also remembered the space occasionally reflecting light in uneven streaks, indicating surrounding surfaces were not flat, but had many angles or reflective mineral crystals. The fourth data group was physical description of the floor and living space. Jonas repeatedly mentioned an uneven floor with sharp or powdery mineral debris under his hands. He said there were periods he had to crouch to move, unable to stand upright for weeks. Walls and floor had moisture, like water seeping from the rock, but without the strong draft felt in larger main chambers. Jonas described a low-ceiling structure, sometimes brushing his head against rock, only about 4.5 feet above the floor. These details allowed geologists to hypothesize that Jonas was confined in a small alcove or side passage, possibly connected to a larger chamber via a narrow fissure where airflow shifted seasonally. From the 4 data groups, analysts built a preliminary model of the confinement environment. They used aerodynamics maps, 2007 geological data, and 3-dimensional spatial simulations to identify structures capable of producing the wind cycles Jonas described. The surprising result, only a few never-surveyed branches, mostly outside the safe range of the 2007 SARE campaign, matched the described characteristics. These branches featured seasonal airflow changes, strong humidity fluctuations, small confined spaces, and mineral angles capable of reflecting weak light. Some deep eastern branches of Carlsbad Caverns, noted in 1989 geological records as potential but unsurveyed, had structures aligning so closely with Jonas's descriptions that despite his inability to recall exact location or entry method, they matched remarkably. Investigators also built a behavioral description table based on the sounds Jonas heard, especially metal clinks and footsteps, and concluded that if a third party existed, they moved in a wider, more open space, possibly tens of meters from Jonas's position, and connected to a larger rock corridor. The confinement environment model, formed over more than 40 hours of analysis, showed Jonas's testimony did not contradict Carlsbad Caverns' actual structure. On the contrary, it aligned with areas the SR campaign never reached due to extreme hazard levels. The 112-page summary report concluded, Jonas Reed's fragmented testimony showed internal consistency, fit the model of an unsurveyed cave branch, and suggested the plausible existence of a space large enough for long-term human confinement, yet sealed enough to leave no clear traces for the 2007 SAR. With this conclusion, the interagency team officially recommended reopening cold case #07CC194, the first time since 2007, acknowledging that the disappearance of Jonas Reed and Lucas Hale likely involved criminal intervention rather than a purely natural cave accident as initially assumed. Immediately after the analysis report on Jonas Reed's fragmented testimony was completed and forwarded to federal level, cold case #07CC194 was officially reopened on March 18, 2011. With the establishment of an interagency task force comprising NPS, FBI, USGS, and the Department of the Interior's Special Geological Engineering Team. This marked the first time in Carlsbad Caverns history that a disappearance was handled under a federal criminal model rather than purely as a natural environment accident. The task force immediately set its core objective: resurvey the entire subsurface structure of Carlsbad Caverns using modern technology unavailable during the 2007 SR campaign, particularly multi-layer LiDAR systems and small drones specialized for extremely confined spaces. The initial phase involved comprehensive LiDAR scanning to create a high-resolution 3D map of the cave system. Within 2 weeks, the USGS engineering team deployed 18 fixed scanning stations and more than 70 mobile scans along human traversable rock corridors. LiDAR not only captured depth, slope, and surface structure, but also detected mineral density variations, an essential factor for identifying surfaces subjected to non-natural mechanical impact. When the data were integrated into a composite 3D model, previously unmapped areas began to appear as faint void shadows, potential spaces never accessed by humans due to being behind fissures only a few dozen centimeters wide. Concurrently, the FBI deployed micro-UAV drone teams, palm-sized units designed to thread through narrow cracks and transmit real-time infrared imagery to the control center. These drones were inserted into branches the 2007 SR campaign had been forced to exclude due to extreme hazard. Narrow Crown Fault, Spiral Sink, Eastern Vale, and several points never assigned NPS identifiers. Each deep drone penetration experienced severe signal degradation, requiring the operations team to employ low-frequency wave systems and set up in-cave relay amplifiers to maintain connectivity. During the sixth drone exploration sortie, in an unnamed deep eastern branch of Carlsbad Caverns, the camera system recorded the first anomaly since the case reopened. A rock wall, with a structure not entirely natural. Typically, limestone surfaces in the cave form soft curves from water weathering, but at the drone's imaging position, the wall displayed straight, parallel cuts with an unnaturally smooth surface, as if shaped by high-force metal tools. Reflected light analysis showed smoothness far exceeding natural levels, nearly polished or deliberately chiseled. When the drone advanced more than 4 meters through the fissure, the camera captured another striking detail: a small hemispherical void, size just large enough for one person curled up, with a floor smoother than the surrounding rock. Several mineral crystals were sliced crosswise, indicating removal by a sharp object. No fabric traces, no footprints, but the spatial shape matched remarkably with Jonas's description of a small confinement space, low ceiling, uneven floor, yet with smooth patches from continuous contact. LiDAR verified the anomalous wall section had inconsistent density, with the cave floor curve disrupted over a length of nearly 1.7 meters, a feature only possible from mechanical intervention, not natural geological change. The drone continued forward, but lost signal immediately after the second tight corner, forcing the control team to abort to avoid losing equipment in unmapped terrain. Nevertheless, the acquired data sufficed for the task force to designate the location as a high-priority suspect point. The site was coded Sector E17 Anomaly, with internal coordinates aligning with one of the regions Jonas's memory analysis had predicted as a likely confinement environment. Experts concurred that the appearance of a wall with straight-cut features was completely inconsistent with Carlsbad Caverns' natural characteristics, and the likelihood of deliberate shaping was extremely high. This new data was immediately incorporated into the tactical map, and a ground survey plan by human team was drafted. Because Sector E17 lay deep within a narrow structure, Command had to calculate risks of micro-collapse, toxic gas, and rock traps before deploying an approach team. The next mission was no longer victim search, it was approaching a potential crime scene that had existed in the darkness of Carlsbad Caverns for 4 years. The NPS Special Response Team, coordinated with geological technicians and 2 FBI investigators, was deployed on April 2, 2011, to directly access Sector E17 Anomaly, the location where the drone detected the artificially shaped wall. After nearly 3 hours navigating narrow rock fissures and an additional hour establishing multi-point safety anchor lines at the sole natural entry, the rescue team began approaching the anomalous wall. Initial testing with a geological hammer and density meter revealed the wall section had a thin rock layer affixed, using a mixture of crushed mineral and water, not the cave's natural surface. After confirming low collapse risk, the engineering team used geological knives and specialized prying tools to remove the false rock layer in small segments without generating major vibration. Within 40 minutes, an opening fissure appeared, just wide enough for a person to crawl through, leading directly into complete darkness. When headlamps were switched on, the entire team almost simultaneously registered this was not a natural rock alcove. It was a deliberately constructed confinement chamber. The chamber was nearly hemispherical, with an average diameter of 1.9 meters and a maximum height of only about 1.5 meters. The domed ceiling bore horizontal smoothing streaks, indicating prolonged human body friction. The floor was uneven, but showed distinct wear zones, especially in the left corner, where the rock had been hollowed into a concave shape from repeated contact, matching Jonas's description of having to sit curled for many months. Humidity inside the chamber was over 10% higher than the outer corridor, indicating minimal air circulation, consistent with Jonas's reported respiratory damage. As the team swept lights across the entire space, multiple items of evidence immediately became visible. First, was a thin nylon restraint segment, about 40 centimeters long, with two tightened points still bearing impressions. One end was encrusted with mineral dust mixed with decayed fabric fibers, suggesting it had once been tied to a rock surface or fixed object. Near the floor, the team found three small crescent-shaped metal fragments, possibly detached parts of handmade handcuffs or cinch rings. In one corner were two rusted canned food tins, one opened unevenly with serrated metal edges. The expiration date printed on the cans stopped in 2008, a time aligning with Jonas's disappearance period. Not far away, a gray fabric scrap, now rotted, adhered to the rock surface. Quick fluorescent light analysis revealed dried protein traces, likely human sweat. The team also discovered carved markings on the wall, about 50 centimeters above the floor, consisting of tally groups of 5. The total estimated marks exceeded 400, though some had eroded. Based on common day counting patterns used by isolated victims, investigators determined these likely represented time spent in the chamber. Below the tallies were two shallowly carved letters. LH, unclear whether inscribed by Jonas or someone else. All evidence was collected under sealed forensic protocol, packaged, sealed, and position-coded. Mineral dust samples, floor samples, rope fibers, and rust traces on the cans were taken for mixed DNA and microtrace analysis. The mobile lab at command began sample processing the same day. Preliminary results showed Jonas Reed's DNA on the nylon rope and fabric scrap, consistent with his having been restrained in the chamber. Notably, a very small quantity of additional unidentified DNA was found on the can rim and one metal fragment. Though too minute for full profiling, its presence confirmed at least 2 human individuals had been in E17 chamber at some point, though not necessarily simultaneously or both confined. Mineral analysis revealed parallel scratches on chamber surfaces originating from sharp metal implements, not natural forces. Wear depth on ceiling and floor was uniform, proving formation from prolonged repeated motion, not anomalous water erosion. When synthesizing all observations and evidence, the forensics and geology teams reached the most significant conclusion since the case reopened. E17 chamber was an artificial confinement structure, expanded and maintained by human activity, used repeatedly over a long period, not a natural cave alcove. The presence of restraints, day count tallies, food cans, and mixed DNA completely eliminated the hypothesis that Jonas was merely accidentally trapped. The confinement chamber was systematically established, calculated, and very likely had held at least one other person besides Jonas. With this discovery, the task force designated E17 as the highest-level crime scene within Carlsbad Caverns and prepared to transition to analyzing the chamber's usage timeline, duration, and the possibility of a perpetrator operating long-term in this complex cave environment. During the third expanded drone deployment after E17 chamber was established as a crime scene, the task force decided to insert a microcrawler UAV, capable of clinging to rock and traversing vertical axes, into a fissure approximately 27 meters southeast of E17, where LiDAR indicated a deep void but insufficient space for safe human access. At an approximate depth of 11 meters below the corridor floor level, the infrared camera recorded a human body-shaped form lying on its side, head pressed against rock, no movement, clothing almost completely decayed. The imagery, transmitted to control, immediately triggered probable remains recovery protocol. Within 2 days, the rescue team established a multi-point anchor system to reach the alcove directly. Upon reaching the remains, skeletal and soft tissue decomposition indicated the victim had died many years earlier. Initial confirmation based on facial bone structure, height, and a decayed camera strap fragment, still adhering to the shoulder blade, strongly indicated the remains were almost certainly Lucas Hale. Transporting the body out of the alcove required extreme caution due to micro-subsidence signs in the area, but after nearly 4 hours, Lucas's remains were brought to the mobile forensics station at command. There, official autopsy commenced. Lucas's skeleton, exhibited multiple pre-mortem long-term injuries. At least 3 ribs showed misaligned healed fractures, indicating injuries occurred, but went untreated. The left foot had a longitudinal crack, a trauma type common from twisting force or heavy sliding on uneven surfaces, matching Jonas's descriptions of both being dragged across rough rock floors. The right humerus bore 2 near-parallel hairline fractures, estimated to have formed about 1 year before death, showing repeated impacts consistent with forced restraint or prolonged weight-bearing in a coerced posture. The skull showed no fatal impact trauma, but the jaw structure indicated severe muscle atrophy from extended malnutrition. Remaining soft tissue in the chest and abdomen showed severe protein energy wasting, consistent with starvation or severely restricted rations over a long period. Notably, where grooves on the shoulder and wrist bones indicated Lucas had been bound or immobilized for a significant duration. Narrow, uniform depth grooves were identified as resulting from soft but durable material, such as nylon rope, repeatedly applied over many months. This matched the restraint segment found in E17 chamber. Forensics also determined mineral incrustation in bone crevices was consistent with minerals from sector E17 and the deep alcove where the remains were found, proving Lucas had lived in an environment identical or adjacent to Jonas's confinement site. Regarding cause of death, specialist factors identified no single fatal injury. Instead, Lucas died from a combination of prolonged exhaustion, severe malnutrition, and untreated cumulative trauma. Unstable bone fractures combined with muscle atrophy made self-standing, self-movement, or self-protection nearly impossible in the final months. No weapon-inflicted wounds were present, but the body's position, lying in a narrow rock fissure, a distance from E17 chamber impossible for someone in emaciated condition to reach independently, indicated Lucas was most likely transported there while comatose or unable to resist. When cross-referenced with Jonas's fragmented testimony, several striking consistencies emerged. Jonas repeatedly mentioned not hearing Lucas anymore after an unspecified point and described hearing something heavy being dragged away, details aligning with the hypothesis that Lucas was removed from the main confinement chamber. Jonas also described a final phase of solitary confinement, no longer receiving shared rations as before, reinforcing the likelihood that Lucas had died months before Jonas was found. Another notable match was Jonas's recollection of red light appearing in the chamber, possibly from a perpetrator's handheld illumination device while moving between confinement points. This aligned with the existence of 2 separate sites, E17 confinement chamber and the remains alcove, proving the confinement environment was not a single point but a tiered system deliberately utilized by the perpetrator. The final forensic conclusion affirmed Lucas Hale was held captive for an extended period, sustained multiple untreated injuries, and died from combined exhaustion factors. The body's location indicated he did not die in E17 chamber, but was moved to another area within the same cave system. These findings were immediately transferred to the task force for integration into the confinement timeline and expansion of the investigation into the possibility that the perpetrator had operated a multi-point control mechanism within Carlsbad Caverns for many years. When the forensic results from E17 confinement chamber and Lucas Hale's remains alcove were compiled, the Federal DNA Laboratory at Quantico received the unknown DNA sample recovered from the can rim and metal fragment in the confinement chamber for high-sensitivity amplification analysis. After nearly 3 weeks of cross-referencing with the CODIS database, a match emerged. The unknown DNA profile aligned with the record of Caleb Rhodes, male born in 1970, who had lived and worked in the Carlsbad area for many years. Immediately, the investigative team created a subject profile and reviewed Rhodes's entire background. Records showed Rhodes had been a semi-professional survey technician participating in NPS cave research programs in the early 2000s, but was removed from the team in 2005 due to safety non-compliance, unauthorized expansion of certain rock fissures, and aggressive behavior toward teammates. Some internal reports also noted Rhodes had been warned for using unauthorized rock chiseling tools to create his own paths in narrow cave branches. After suspension, Rhodes severed ties with official survey organizations and shifted to freelance work, living reclusively on the edge of the Chihuahuan Desert, about 30 miles from Carlsbad Caverns. Analysis of Rhodes's purchase history through records from tool stores in Carlsbad and Artesia revealed several suspicious details. Between 2006-2008, Rhodes frequently purchased items directly related to constructing or maintaining a confinement space: thin nylon rope, red light flashlights, small quantities of canned food, handheld rock-cutting tools, mineral mixing powder for reinforcing wall surfaces, and especially numerous small steel pipes with no clear civilian use. Some purchase records also showed Rhodes buying low-energy lamps with color filter lenses, matching Jonas's memory of weak red light appearing in the chamber. Additionally, payment card data indicated frequent purchases of industrial tape and sealing materials, consistent with fabricating false rock surfaces or concealing openings, as the rescue team had broken through in E17. The team also reviewed Rhodes's prior legal record and noted 2 instances of police questioning for disorderly conduct and trespassing in restricted Carlsbad Caverns areas, both involving his presence near sealed hazardous branches. Although never prosecuted, the record showed Rhodes had a pattern of unauthorized entry into NPS-prohibited survey zones. When cross-referencing Rhodes's past behavior with E17 chamber characteristics, numerous clear matches emerged. The chamber's shaping with crude metal tools rather than professional equipment aligned with Rhodes's improvisational style, reported by colleagues in 2005. The unnaturally flattened wall surfaces also matched Rhodes's habit of making paths by chiseling rock, according to his own imagination, in narrow branches. Moreover, the existence of 2 separate sites, E17 confinement chamber and Lucas's remains alcove, indicated the perpetrator possessed deep knowledge of cavern structure and the ability to move fluidly through unmapped points, something a former semi-professional surveyor, like Rhodes, was fully capable of doing. Analysis of purchase habits and movement records further showed Rhodes frequently appeared near caverns during time frames aligning with aerodynamic changes, Jonas recalled in fragmented memories. Archived 2007 traffic camera footage, though low resolution, captured a small black pickup truck moving into the vicinity of the Devil's Ridge access side entrance 2 days before Jonas and Lucas disappeared. Although not clear enough to identify the license plate, the vehicle matched the type Rhodes had registered. Synthesizing this substantial body of evidence, the task force determined that Rhodes was not only a behavioral and terrain capability match, but the only individual in the database with DNA present at the confinement chamber scene. The combination of DNA, dangerous behavioral history, in-depth cavern structural knowledge, and purchase history directly tied to confinement mechanisms made Rhodes the sole suspect in the case. In the report submitted to the Department of Justice, the task force officially recommended upgrading Rhodes's status from person of interest to primary suspect, with the highest priority for pursuit. Based on all forensic data from E17 confinement chamber, Lucas Hale's remains location, Jonas Reed's fragmented testimony, and Caleb Rhodes's behavioral record, the task force systematically reconstructed the abduction process to determine how the perpetrator approached, subdued, and sustained long-term confinement inside Carlsbad Caverns. The first step was identifying a plausible ambush point. Based on the travel route Jonas and Lucas registered in the exploration log, on the morning of April 12, 2007, the two intended to enter via Devil's Ridge access, an area with many small side branches prone to disorientation if unfamiliar with the rock structure. Cross-referencing the planned route, with points where Rhodes had been documented trespassing in 2005, investigators pinpointed an intersection only about 260 meters from the entrance, where 3 narrow branches formed a Y shape. At this point, the rock face had a gentle slope, and acoustics bent sound so footsteps could easily be misdirected. This was assessed as an ideal ambush location, because Rhodes could conceal himself in a side fissure, later confirmed by drone, to contain old activity traces such as decayed burlap fragments and plastic scraps. From the assumed ambush position, forensic reconstruction focused on how Jonas and Lucas were separated. Based on fragmented testimony, Jonas recalled a moment of sudden loss of balance and Lucas's cry echoing backward but quickly fading. This aligned with the possibility Rhodes used a temporary incapacitating tool, not necessarily an electric weapon, but possibly a forceful push to the rib or shoulder area on a slick rock floor, causing the victim to lose footing. No direct traces remained at the scene, but the geology team confirmed the rock floor at the Y intersection had a structure prone to slipping under sudden force. From this, the separation model was built. Rhodes approached from behind, shoved Lucas into a pre-selected side branch or narrow pit, while immediately restraining Jonas with binding or dragging him in another direction, preventing the two from reacting or assisting each other. Confining Jonas in E17 chamber showed the perpetrator had a plan to access and move victims deep into the cave system immediately after subduing them, exploiting disorientation and darkness to eliminate any resistance capability. After initial reconstruction, the task force inferred the feeding and watering cycle, an essential factor in determining perpetrator behavior and operational timing. Based on Jonas's testimony, rations appeared irregularly, but in estimated 36 48-hour cycles during the early phase. Discovery of 2 food cans expired in 2008 in E17 chamber allowed inference that Rhodes maintained a drip feed supply for over a year. Mineral concentration and floor wear levels in E17 also indicated relatively low movement frequency, about a few times per week, consistent with a lone individual operating the confinement system. Based on wall wear depth, analysts calculated Jonas was immobilized in E17 for at least 18-24 months before visitation cycles thinned, matching Jonas's description that footsteps no longer came regularly in the later phase. This opened the possibility that Rhodes shifted priorities or faced personal circumstances reducing his chamber access frequency. Concurrently, the timing of Lucas's relocation was inferred from remains position and bone trauma extent. Older bone fractures on Lucas's remains, some formed 8-12 months before death, indicated long-term confinement comparable to Jonas in the early phase. However, starvation and emaciation signs on Lucas's body were far more severe, suggesting he was moved to another location, possibly the deep alcove where remains were found, during a phase when Rhodes no longer provided regular food. Cross-referenced with Jonas's testimony, he recalled not hearing Lucas anymore after a long silent cycle, marking complete separation of the two. Forensics concluded Lucas was likely relocated around 2009 and died shortly thereafter from malnutrition, combined with cumulative trauma. Based on all data, the task force constructed a comprehensive confinement timeline map, an unprecedented level of detail for prolonged cave environment captivity cases. The timeline included main phases. 1 capture phase, Rhodes ambushed at the Y intersection, separated Jonas and Lucas, and took them in different directions within the cave. 2. Dual confinement phase, mid-2007 to approximately early 2009, evidenced by E17 floor wear, provided food type, and Jonas's memory descriptions of hearing Lucas's breathing or movement from afar. 3. Separation phase, Lucas moved to deep alcove. Jonas remained in E17, but with reduced perpetrator contact frequency. 4. Final deterioration phase, noted by Jonas's testimony of long months without food, consistent with his emaciated condition upon discovery, and Lucas's estimated time of death. This timeline was presented in a 147-page report to the Department of Justice, emphasizing consistency among forensics, confinement traces, and victim testimony. It affirmed the case was not a geological accident, but a prolonged sequence of kidnapping, captivity, and control, carried out in an extremely inaccessible environment, thanks to the perpetrator's deep cave knowledge. During the weeks-long recovery process after rescue, Jonas Reed began recalling small details he previously could not connect. And these new memory fragments helped the task force refine the perpetrator identification with higher accuracy. One of the first details Jonas recalled was a highly distinctive sound whenever the perpetrator approached the chamber. A steady thud, drag, thud, unlike bare feet or standard climbing boots. When described in more detail, Jonas said the person's shoe soles were hard with small metal points clinking against rock, producing short echoes. The investigative team cross-referenced this description with evidence data and Caleb Rhodes's purchase records, discovering Rhodes had once bought an old pair of industrial mining boots with small steel toe cleats, a type rarely used in cave environments, but perfectly matching Jonas's description. Additionally, Jonas recalled a characteristic odor whenever the person came near the chamber. Machine oil mixed with old metal, like lubricant used on rock-cutting tools. This smell could not be confused with lamp oil or food, and appeared consistently over many months, indicating the perpetrator regularly handled mechanical equipment before approaching victims. When forensics analyzed E17 evidence, they found trace grease residue on one metal fragment and chamber wall, oil similar to lubricant sold at the tool store where Rhodes shopped. This coincidence reinforced the hypothesis that the perpetrator used manual grinding, prying, or cutting tools to maintain the chamber structure. Jonas also began recalling the distinctive sound of tools the perpetrator carried. He described a clinking of metal objects knocking together, likely pick tips or cutters on a belt. Whenever the person moved, the metal items produced short chains of sound, identical to noises the rescue team heard when examining metal fragments in the chamber, indicating E17 was not created once, but periodically modified. These descriptions fully aligned with Rhodes's record of habitually carrying crude, unsorted tools and wearing them in a hip pouch during prior cave entries. Another critical detail emerged when Jonas began describing moments the perpetrator approached to deliver food. He recalled a repeated phrase, initially very vague, but after multiple psychological stabilization sessions, Jonas could reproduce it nearly accurately. The phrase was short, just 2 words, delivered in a hoarse, slightly drawn-out voice with a southwestern New Mexico regional accent. When Jonas repeated it, investigators recognized it matched a phrase Rhodes had used in an inadvertently recorded 2004 survey team meeting, an exclamation with a characteristically elongated final sound. FBI, phonetic analysis, concluded the likelihood the 2 voices belonged to the same person exceeded 90%, even though Jonas heard through rock and in echoing conditions. The most significant breakthrough came when Jonas recalled details of the perpetrator's hand. He could not see the face because the chamber stayed dark and light lasted only seconds each time. But Jonas clearly remembered a straight scar about 1 knuckle long on the person's thumb, with a slightly raised surface when touched. The team checked Rhodes's old medical records and found that in 2002, he sustained an injury from rock-cutting tools, receiving 8 stitches at the local hospital, scar location matching Jonas's description exactly. When all memory fragments were cross-referenced with evidence, the task force observed astonishing alignment: industrial metal-soled boots, specialized machine oil smell, rock-cutting tool traces, distinctive speech, habit of carrying clinking gear, and hand scar characteristic. Not only did these match Jonas's testimony, they also fit Rhodes's behavioral history, collected cave evidence, and mechanical marks on the confinement chamber. The summary report affirmed that Jonas Reed had provided a complete, consistent, and legally valuable identification set directly linking Caleb Rhodes to the E17 scene and the entire confinement mechanism. With DNA data, physical traces, behavioral descriptions, and perpetrator personal characteristics fully established, the task force concluded sufficient grounds existed to request a federal arrest warrant, transitioning the case from extended investigation to official legal action. After the federal arrest warrant was signed at the end of May 2011, the task force launched an operation to approach Caleb Rhodes in the sparse rugged forest area east of Carlsbad Caverns, where he had set up a semi-permanent tent approximately 3 miles from the main trail. The FBI Special Operations Team, in coordination with park rangers, established a perimeter before dawn on June 2nd, using thermal imaging cameras to confirm Rhodes's position while he was sleeping inside the tent. The operation was conducted in absolute silence. 2 agents advanced from the north to block any escape route toward the rocky slope, while the rest of the team sealed off the southern trailhead, ensuring the suspect could not flee into the fissures leading to the cave system. When the team moved in, Rhodes only managed to react by jumping to his feet, but was immediately subdued. He was not carrying any weapon on his person, though his evasive movements and mild resistance indicated clear awareness of law enforcement presence. Immediately after handcuffing him, the investigative team executed a search of the tent and a 20-meter radius surrounding area pursuant to a pre-prepared search warrant. What they discovered strongly corroborated the allegations. Inside an old plastic drum, they found a set of rock chiseling tools consisting of 5 steel chisel tips, 2 geological hammers, a metal pair of pliers, and a short-bladed trimming knife, all bearing grinding marks and limestone mineral dust, matching the type collected in cell E17. Another wooden box contained 7 rolls of thin, high-strength braided nylon cord, identical in characteristics to the material on the restraints found in Jonas's chamber. Along the tent wall hung a heavy canvas bag containing 4 red light flashlights with rare-colored filters. One of them showed distinctive scratch marks, consistent with Jonas's description of the faint red light he recalled when the perpetrator appeared. Additionally, the tent held a small quantity of canned food. Several cans of the same brand and size as the rusted cans found in cell E17, though with different expiration dates. The mobile analysis team recorded metal lubricant residue on the surface of one of the chisels that matched the grease sample collected in the cave. One of the geological hammer handles still bore fingerprint impressions, matching Rhodes's profile in the prior conviction database. Another critical find was in his jacket pocket. A scrap of paper with scribbled symbols, measurements, and directions, closely resembling common notations on NPS cave maps, but written in a personal code, likely Rhodes's method of memorizing passages, not documented on official maps. When Rhodes was transported to the FBI office in Carlsbad for questioning, he maintained a stubborn attitude, denying all charges and claiming he had been set up. Rhodes insisted he had never had contact with Jonas Reed or Lucas Hale, and that his DNA appearing at the scene was merely a lab mix-up. However, when investigators showed him images of cell E17 and the tools recovered from the tent, Rhodes appeared shaken but still refused to confess. He repeatedly demanded a lawyer and stated that all seized items were solely for his personal cave exploration hobby in his own way, unrelated to any criminal activity. During the 7-hour interrogation, Rhodes contradicted himself multiple times. He initially claimed ignorance of the deeper branches of the caverns, yet later described in detail the echo characteristics of one corridor that appeared only in internal geological reports. He also failed to explain why he possessed the exact type of nylon cord and chiseling tools matching the cuts and structure in cell E17. Every point in his statements was rebutted by investigators with physical evidence. Grinding marks on the chisel tips matched the walls of E17, machine oil residue matched cave samples. Rhodes's shoe soles matched the acoustic description provided by Jonas, and the encoded map demonstrated knowledge far exceeding that of an ordinary explorer. Ultimately, despite Rhodes's continued denials, the case file became too clear to refute. Crime scene DNA, seized physical evidence, victim testimony, and behavioral records all pointed to the same conclusion. The task force finalized its report and transferred the complete file, including the forensic map of the cell, evidence analysis, interrogation transcripts, and DNA test results, to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of New Mexico. The case officially moved to the prosecution phase. The federal trial of Caleb Rhodes began in April 2012 in the U.S. District Court for New Mexico. Attended by federal prosecutors, court-appointed defense counsel, NPS representatives, the FBI, and numerous forensic experts called as technical witnesses. From opening statements, The prosecution presented a tightly structured argument built on 4 pillars: cell E17 DNA evidence, the forensic mapped crime scene reconstruction, and Jonas Reed's consistent testimony, all juxtaposed as independent but mutually reinforcing layers of proof. First, a 3D rendered reconstruction of cell E17 was displayed, a narrow, low-ceilinged space with smooth grinding marks on the rock walls, multiple floor depressions from repeated contact, and the recovered items. Prosecutors explained how the cell could not have formed naturally and could only have been created and maintained through deliberate metal tool intervention. And those very tools were found in Rhodes's tent, with matching mineralogical traces. Next came the DNA presentation. Mixed DNA samples on the can rim and metal fragment in the cell contained genetic material from both Jonas Reed and Caleb Rhodes, while DNA inside the alcove, where Lucas Hale's body was found, matched Rhodes at an irrefutable statistical level. Quantico lab comparison charts were shown to the jury, confirming not only Rhodes's presence at the scene, but also that his DNA appeared in manipulative positions, such as cut points on cans and tool handle contact areas, indicating active perpetrator involvement rather than random presence. The third layer of evidence was forensic mapping. Reconstructions of the confinement process based on airflow, humidity, acoustics, and mineral analysis. These simulations revealed travel routes within the cave system that only someone with deep knowledge of cavern structure could have used. They introduced comparison charts of the perpetrator's estimated movement paths against Rhodes's documented illegal cave activity history from 2005, showing remarkable overlap between areas Rhodes had previously entered and the location where the cell was discovered. Finally, Jonas Reed's testimony, though acknowledged by prosecutors as fragmented, was introduced as a supporting pillar that tied the physical evidence together. Jonas described metal-studded boot characteristics, machine oil smell, tool clanking sounds, distinctive speech, and a scar on the perpetrator's hand, all aligning with information gathered from Rhodes, seized evidence, and his injury records. The defense focused on 2 main lines of rebuttal. First, they emphasized that Jonas Reed had been held for years in conditions of near-total darkness, limited mobility, and severe psychological trauma, resulting in PTSD and potential for false memory formation. They argued that Jonas's recollections could not be considered reliable evidence, especially since he could only describe the perpetrator through indirect details without a clear facial image. Second, they contended that the trace DNA could not be conclusively attributed to Rhodes, given the small quantity and the possibility of cave environment contamination. They raised the possibility of mixed contaminants, or that Rhodes had entered the cave before 2007 and left old traces, something they claimed the prosecution had not fully disproven. However, as forensic experts and technical witnesses were called, the defense arguments steadily lost force. The FBI DNA expert clarified that the DNA recovered from the metal fragment and cans was not long deposited trace DNA, but fresh direct contact DNA present at the time the cell was formed, as evidenced by organic material degradation patterns. They stated that DNA could not persist in the high-humidity cave environment for many years without continuous redeposition. Next, geology and speleology experts demonstrated the independence of each physical evidence type: wall grinding marks, straight cuts, machine oil traces, cell structure, floor stone wear, and cave airflow cycles, all aligned with repeated intentional activity. No natural process or memory distortion could simultaneously produce these traces. A criminologist invited by the FBI presented a behavioral analysis of the perpetrator compared to Rhodes's profile. The analysis showed Rhodes fit the lone subterranean captor-offender pattern: individuals who seek to control enclosed environments, act alone, operate in spaces isolated from society, and exhibit deviant control-oriented behavior. They highlighted his habit of collecting metal tools, history of illegal cave entries, and antisocial traits as perfectly matching this profile. During cross-examination, prosecutors repeatedly asked Rhodes to explain why he possessed tools with grinding marks matching the cell. why his red flashlights shared features with Jonas's description, and why his DNA appeared at the metal fragment location in the cell. But Rhodes responded evasively, or remained silent on his attorney's advice. His attempts at self-defense, such as, "I just chipped rocks for fun," or "I just went to look at the caves," were quickly challenged by the forensic map showing his presence in non-public branches, requiring high proficiency. The trial's climax came when an acoustics expert testified that sound waves produced by metal-studded soles striking limestone matched 97% of the audio Jonas described. The acoustic simulation was played live, eliciting visible reactions from several jurors. After nearly 3 weeks of proceedings, once all evidence was presented, the defense had little left to counter beyond reiterating PTSD and false memory claims. But that position was undermined by the fact that Jonas was not the sole source. Every statement was independently corroborated by physical evidence ranging from the cell itself, DNA, oil traces, tool shapes, to bodily injury patterns. The jury then entered deliberations. Records indicate they examined each evidence layer as independent links that, when reassembled, formed a unified logical structure with no room for any alternative hypothesis besides Rhodes. Ultimately, the jury concluded that the prosecution had proven the charges beyond a reasonable doubt, particularly through the combination of forensic mapping, physical traces, and behavioral profiling, leading to a guilty verdict on all counts against Caleb Rhodes. The sentencing hearing took place 2 weeks after the jury unanimously reached a guilty verdict in a heavily secured session at the New Mexico District Court, where the federal judge delivered the final judgment against Caleb Rhodes on 3 serious felony charges: federal kidnapping resulting in serious bodily injury, prolonged unlawful detention in an especially hazardous environment, and causing the death of Lucas Hale in the course of committing the offense. The courtroom fell silent as the judge summarized the entire evidentiary framework presented throughout the trial, stressing that the sentence was not based on any single testimony or subjective impression, but on a robust forensic network. The hand-built confinement chamber deep inside Carlsbad Caverns, inexplicable DNA traces that could not be reconciled with any innocent scenario, LiDAR and drone technology reconstructing the perpetrator's line of activity, and a detention timeline that perfectly matched medical data, as well as the fragmented testimony of Jonas Reed. The judge particularly noted that the case featured a consistent and mutually reinforcing chain of physical evidence from a metal fragment bearing Rhodes's DNA, machine oil residues matching those found in his residence, to the E-17 confinement structure showing tool mark matches with seized implements, and none of these points had been credibly rebutted by scientific counterarguments. Furthermore, the perpetrator's conduct over many years, including maintaining a secret detention facility, moving Jonas and Lucas between rock alcoves, controlling food and light sources, demonstrated a high degree of premeditation, calculation, and clear awareness of legal consequences, placing the case among the most severe categories of federal crimes. The prosecution stated in court that Rhodes's continued denial, lack of cooperation, and inability to provide any plausible explanation for the presence of his DNA, physical evidence, and the confinement structure he constructed were factors justifying their recommendation of the maximum sentence under the guidelines: life imprisonment without parole. In their closing remarks, the defense requested that the court consider the defendant's psychological factors and isolated living circumstances, but this argument was swiftly rejected by the judge on the grounds that no medical data or psychiatric records indicated Rhodes lacked the capacity to understand or control his actions. Ultimately, the judge sentenced Rhodes to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole or commutation, along with special restrictive orders during incarceration due to the defendant's demonstrated level of dangerousness and prolonged compulsive control behavior. In the oral pronouncement of the sentence, the judge emphasized that justice in this case was achieved through interdisciplinary coordination between the NPS, FBI, forensic teams, and the tireless efforts of the cold case unit in deciphering a hidden underground confinement system that had evaded detection for years. Rhodes was handcuffed and escorted out of the courtroom in absolute silence, marking the conclusion of a case that had spanned nearly a decade and closing the series of questions surrounding the disappearance of two explorers in 2007. Following the life without parole sentence imposed on Caleb Rhodes, the repercussions of the case quickly extended far beyond the legal realm and became a turning point in how federal agencies assess criminal risks in remote natural environments. The National Park Service conducted a comprehensive review of caving exploration permitting procedures from 2013 and earlier, finding that the majority of self-guided expeditions at Carlsbad Caverns relied on voluntary self-reporting, lacked continuous real-time position tracking for exploration parties, and had no mechanism for marking high-risk zones in real time. As a result, a new set of standards was implemented, requiring all exploration groups to carry specialized cave system positioning devices, adding entry, exit checkpoints, and deploying quarterly updated geological risk alert mapping. At the same time, the NPS established a dedicated assessment unit to evaluate anomalous signs within cave systems, preventing the creation or unauthorized modification of areas such as the E-17 confinement chamber in the Rhodes case. Meanwhile, the FBI incorporated the case into advanced training programs for compulsion crime analysis teams in enclosed environments, particularly the subterranean captivity model, which had previously been documented mostly in theory, with very few real-world U.S. instances. The Rhodes file became an official case study in the FBI Academy curriculum at Quantico, focusing on three core themes: 1. Identifying signs of artificial human intervention in natural structures, 2. Applying forensic mapping in nonlinear spatial systems, and 3. Methodologies for evaluating fragmented testimony from long-term surviving victims under prolonged detention conditions. The analyses in this case enabled the FBI to develop a new model for tracking behavior in camera-free, witness-free, surface-track-free environments, relying entirely on microphysical traces and aeroacoustic data. On Jonas Reed's side, after nearly 2 years of intensive physical rehabilitation combined with psychological therapy, he gradually regained mobility, adapted vision, and psychological stability. Jonas chose to join federal cave rescue veteran training courses, sharing survival experiences in confined environments, identifying signs of illegal modifications, and assisting in simulations of forced confinement scenarios to improve rescue personnel response capabilities. His participation, as the sole surviving victim of a multi-year underground captivity case, became a key factor in shifting NPS training structures toward greater realism, emphasizing early anomaly detection rather than focusing solely on traditional movement and extraction skills. Within criminology research circles, the Rhodes case is regarded as a landmark that opened a new branch of study on off-grid captivity offenders, perpetrators who operate entirely outside societal observation by exploiting natural terrain such as caves, abandoned mines, tunnels, or deep forests. Numerous universities began incorporating the case into criminology and forensic geology programs, particularly highlighting how offenders can create sophisticated long-term confinement structures in environments previously considered impossible to control indefinitely. The case also spurred interdisciplinary collaboration among geologists, criminologists, forensic experts, and SARA units to build a national database of natural structures vulnerable to criminal exploitation. In the caving community, the event left a lasting mark: updated safety guidelines, professional exploration teams adopting dual-layer tracking protocols, and formerly overlooked areas now subject to tighter periodic LiDAR monitoring. The Jonas Reed, Lucas Hale case did not merely close a long-standing missing persons file, it fundamentally changed how the United States perceives criminal risk in spaces previously believed to be occupied only by nature. The story of Jonas Reed and Lucas Hale, two explorers who vanished in Carlsbad Caverns in 2007, and whose fate was only clarified after Jonas's return 4 years later, reflects a reality that Americans today still confront: vast wilderness harbors not only environmental hazards, but can also become a refuge for crime when oversight, safety standards, and individual caution are lacking. In this case, Jonas and Lucas entered a complex cave system without specialized positioning equipment, without continuous check-in mechanisms, and without providing detailed route information to rangers, making the initial search extraordinarily difficult. That very vulnerability enabled Caleb Rhodes, a former Caverns survey team member, who had been removed, to ambush them and establish a secret underground confinement chamber that went undetected for years. Today, as outdoor activities such as hiking, cave exploring, climbing, and camping have become integral to American lifestyle culture. The lesson from this case is crystal clear: safety must never be taken lightly, and monitoring technologies, such as beacon devices, tracking apps, and digital mapping, must be treated as mandatory standards when venturing into wild areas. The case also serves as a reminder that criminals can exploit gaps in natural area management systems, just as Rhodes created and sustained the E-17 chamber for an extended period without detection. This underscores the need to improve NPS management procedures while simultaneously reminding individuals not to underestimate the dangers of unmonitored regions. Finally, Jonas's survival and recovery efforts send a powerful message for victims: the will to survive and the ability to remember seemingly trivial details, such as the smell of machine oil, the sound of footsteps, the humidity of air currents, can become the key to unraveling a case. For the community, the story highlights the importance of trusting one's instincts, promptly reporting unusual signs, and supporting cooperation among federal agencies to ensure safety for everyone entering spaces where nature and humanity coexist. Thank you for joining us on this haunting journey, decoding the Carlsbad Caverns case. If you'd like to keep exploring more stories of survival, investigation, and justice like this one, please hit subscribe so you don't miss out. See you in the next video, where we continue uncovering the real mysteries hidden beneath the calm surface of America.